Welcome, students, to the update right here on the HYFNtv Network. It's our mission to bring unfiltered, unbiased information to our viewers. Here on the update, we're interviewing Governor, Secretary of State, and Attorney General candidates from each party. These folks are asking for you to vote for them to lead our great state. In this primary candidate interview series, all candidates have been asked the same questions, and all candidates have been invited to speak as well. So sit back, relax, and let's hear from them directly. And then you decide on who you'd like to choose to vote for on August 2nd. And welcome, viewers, to our HYFN TV primary series where we interview on the update every candidate for the Secretary of State, Governor, and AG. Today we are talking to Miss Tiffany Shedd. She is running for the AG office, the Attorney General of Arizona. Now, Miss Tiffany, I'll tell you, I appreciate you coming on. We have a lot of viewers out there that this is our very first time watching any interviews about candidates. They're just learning this is their first time voting. They're just learning about the system, and they are really excited. We've got emails, we've got messages on our social media thanking us for all this great information. So you're participating in this forum to give out your information, to let them know who you are and why you are the best candidate. So, with that being said, I want to introduce to our audience Miss Tiffany. And Tiffany, go ahead and talk to these first-time voters and tell them all about who you are. And really, if you could, reach back into your experience and tell them about your first time voting, if you remember who you voted for, and what they should think about when they're voting and that jazz. And then I have another follow up on that one, but let's just jump into your history of voting and just tell them about it.
So when I turned 18, George H. Bush was running for president. Congressman Jim Colby was our congressman, and I was away at college, so had to go through the process to get a mail-in ballot, and was really upset about that in a way. Wanted to drive home because I wanted to vote in person. But my first president I ever voted for was George H., not W, H. Bush. And I also remember feeling disappointed because I was a huge Reagan fan. All of us coming up through high school, I mean, just loved President Reagan, at least in Pinal County. And I wished I could have had a vote for him, but we went with H because of the year it was. And, I was one of those people that could not wait to vote. My parents never missed an election. They were Republicans. I registered Republican because it's closest to what I believe. And ever since then, when we've had kids, as early as when they could walk, I have taken them to vote in person, and have only missed one sanitary district election in my entire life because I had stomach flu. But I think it's just one of the most, oh gosh, it's wonderful to be able to vote. It's not only a right and a responsibility, but I really enjoy it. I want to go in and get the I voted sticker. And now my children had been raised voting, except I've got one that's not old enough yet. And they are serious voters, do their research on the candidates. And so I'm kind of proud of that as a mom. So.
Right on. So we polled a lot of our viewers that they qualify as active participants, which means they vote regularly. But when we asked them how often do you vote in a primary, 22% said we set the primary out and just vote in general. So what is your message to those in the primary who think the primary is just, now for whatever reason, we don't know why they choose not to, but for whatever reason they choose not to vote in the primary, can you give your pitch on why the primary is so important? Because right now you have 6 candidates for Attorney General, and only one's coming out for that general election. So what's your message to those 22% who kind of sit out the primary?
Please don't sit out the primary. This is the system where we put the best candidate up for the general. And there is oftentimes huge differences when you start to vet candidates between one or another. And so, when you get to the general, usually people are pretty polarized of whether they're Democrat or Republican. And it's kind of easy to check the box. But the real work is done in primaries. And primaries not only hopefully put up the best candidate, but especially if you're a regular person and not in politics, but whether you're homeschooling your kids, own a business, we really need your voice in those primaries, or you're going to end up with someone who might be of your party, but doesn't really represent or care or prioritize the things that you care about. And like I said, the primary is where it really, really matters on that. I would say they're both just as important, the primary and the general. It's a little more work in the primary because you have to be an enlightened citizen and do your homework and figure out which candidate is the best according to you, that lines up with your values, that has the ideas that would help you or your family the most. That work's done in the primary.
Perfect. Okay, so let me jump into your website. Every candidate has a slogan on their website. It's their flag to wave explaining that, this is who I am, this is my why, this is why I'm in this race, this is why I'm the person. So if you don't mind, explain to us your mission, mission statement, so to speak, and your why.
Well, my why is I have watched the government, especially the federal government. I've been a water and natural resource attorney for almost 3 decades. And, we own a 4th-generation farm. We're in the middle of 3 smuggling routes. And it just feels like every single day our rights are infringed upon. We have a border that's being ignored by the administration. And the country that I grew up in when I voted for H. Bush and Jim Colby is disappearing. And especially the state I love is disappearing. It feels like every day someone in government oftentimes is trying to take something away from us. And the Attorney General's office literally has a sword in its logo because it is the sword that pushes back anything that would harm the rights of Arizonans. And I'm a mom. We've got deep, deep roots in Arizona. And it's my generation's turn to stand up like the World War II generation did prior to us, to keep this country great. And the Attorney General's office is such a beautiful office because they don't work for the governor. They don't work for the federal government. They work for the people of Arizona. The only constitutional mandate for the AG is to protect and maintain the individual rights of Arizona, Article 2, Section 2, Arizona Constitution. And we are at an unprecedented time when the checks and balances of our entire governmental system are very broken, because the biggest check and balance on government, on federal government, is the states. We've forgotten that. It's not Congress, the justice system, and the executive. While it is that, the biggest check and balance is the states and we the people. And then the issues that drive me specifically are border security, election integrity, parental rights. I'm a homeschool mom of 20 years. So when we started out, we weren't cool. Now y'all are cool if you're homeschooling. And finally, just every constitutional right, the right to go to church, the right to own a gun, the right to protect your family. And we've watched Australia and Canada become countries I don't even recognize anymore. And I don't want the United States to become that. And the AG doesn't just affect Arizona. Cases that the Attorney General wins at the U.S. Supreme Court or federal court level help every other state to rein in power and push forward with conservative principles.
So I watched the PBS debates, and we had some pretty hot topics happening. And so part of the Attorney General, you are one of 47 states that elect their Attorney General. So the question, is this a nonpartisan office? Because one would stand to reason, well, if you're getting an election where it's not appointed like the other 7 states, possibly this is a partisan office. Now, we've heard it from all candidates. So in a Tiffany Shedd administration, would your office be a partisan position?
Well, it wouldn't be an elected position if it wasn't partisan. And, the Attorney General's office, yes, I would be partisan in that, not that I would be there to serve the Republican Party, because I am a Republican, but I do believe in principles of less government, of individual rights, and those do tend to line up with the Republican Party. And so, where you can be partisan, speaking out, or encouraging other people to run for office, or pushing policy at the legislature, you probably are going to call me partisan. But when it comes to kind of the other hand of the Attorney General's office, is it's the goal is justice. And justice, the reason judges wear black robes is it is supposed to be blind. And we're dealing with individual cases, things like that. And I think it's really important that the law is followed and it's administered fairly, and um, that people people know that. And what worries me, being an attorney and watching the last couple decades, is now we hear things like social justice, environmental justice. Well, when you add an adjective before justice, it's now an agenda. So we just want justice. And so it's kind of the scales that are often found in times in law of part of it is very partisan and part of it is not partisan at all, because justice, it just is. So yeah.
So to summarize that answer, you would you would you it's okay. You would approach it in a partisan when it comes to your agenda via your liaisons at the legislature and your agenda there. But when it comes to executing the job, would you say that you're saying justice is blind? You would execute the job as Arizona's Attorney General, not a partisan Attorney
Yes, except for the big cases that you bring, like to protect the Second Amendment, to stop a vaccine mandate, to protect the Second Amendment. Those tend to be more partisan. But where I'm talking about justice is the cases where we're dealing with an individual Arizonan who perhaps has a criminal case on appeal, or is dealing with an administrative agency. We really just want access to justice and for that to be fair. And the Attorney General's office isn't, or any prosecutor's office, this actually isn't prosecutor's office, but even your county attorneys and your prosecutors, the goal is justice. People sometimes forget it. It's not to win cases. It's not to, get people as much time as you possibly can. It is to achieve justice. So you're still working for the people, even if you're dealing with someone who has misbehaved.
General. Got it. So let's move on to our next question. In the limited scope of what you know, because obviously you're a candidate, you're not incumbent, you don't see the reports, all the things that a current candidate who would maybe be an incumbent would know. So you're on the outside looking in. So with that being said, you are a Republican looking to replace a Republican. So where are some things that you think that the current Attorney General has done great things, good things? Where have you seen where we could fix some things, some shortfalls that you like to jump in and fix?
Okay, well, let's start with the good. So I think that the current Attorney General has done a really good job with consumer protection. The current Attorney General has done a really good job protecting the Second Amendment in Arizona. I think those would be my top two. What I would change about the office, or what I would want to do as Attorney General, it's actually got a pretty good laundry list. So, first of all, election integrity. There's one attorney who's handling both the 2020 issues and the 2022 election that's currently going on. That is severely, severely understaffed. The other issue is there's 22 tribes, native tribes in Arizona, and the AG's office interfaces, or should be interfacing, with all of their attorneys general. And there's not a single lawyer that practices Indian law at the Attorney General. I want to make sure we represent and are working with all Arizonans. There is not an attorney at the Attorney General's office that does water, energy, or natural resources. And the Attorney General's office has a massive amount of jurisdiction over those areas. And, right now we're in the biggest water crisis we've ever been in the state of Arizona. And we have no one in a state or federal office that really has the background knowledge or the will to work on that. I'm a water lawyer, so that's why I notice these things. And then finally, one of the biggest travesties that's been going on for several attorney generals is, the office is in Phoenix. There's a satellite office in Tucson, but the rural counties feel like they don't have representation and can't get a hold of anyone. And so day one, I'm going to assign a deputy attorney general to each of the counties, not Maricopa because our main office is there, but all of the other 14 counties that are starting to go to school board meetings, that learn the city council members. If you think about how a congressional office does constituent services, that's what I want to do as Attorney General. Because if you live in Page, Arizona, or Kingman, and you have a real issue, it's often hard to impossible to drive all the way to Phoenix. You always talk to a different person. They don't know what's going on in your county. And so I want to make sure that everyone in Arizona has a voice and everyone in Arizona is well represented. And rural Arizona has a lot of problems. They just don't make the news.
Got it. Okay. So you mentioned consumer protection. So when it comes to predatory actions here in Arizona, the citizens, they look to the Attorney General's office. Our current and soon-to-be passed AG made quite a name for himself. In his early years, he was busting up a lot of, predatory practices happening. We got the Toner settlement, the Fiat Chrysler settlement, Bright and Shiny settlement, the Theranos settlement, the ABC Nissan, General Motors, Volkswagen. You've heard them all, Western Union. They all made the news, very salacious, very big deals. And we were happy to see that our leaders were working for us. So if you become the next one on this job, are you going to continue that push?
Yes, absolutely. Because the companies that they're dealing with as a private citizen, unless you're maybe a billionaire, you just don't have the resources to stand up for yourself against these companies. And they literally bean count. Well, if it causes this much harm to this many people, we're not going to fix the problem. And one of the areas that I think really needs investigation is the price of medicine. My daughter's a type 1 diabetic, so insulin dependent since she was 6. And we've watched the price of insulin go anywhere from $22 a vial to $800 a vial. That's price gouging. And so making sure that people don't have to choose between food or life-saving medicines. And, I know sometimes even in the generic world, there's price fixing. And I think, we can't live without it oftentimes, that there's a lot of issues in the pharmaceutical world.
Okay, so that actually answers my next question, which was, in your mind, what's a big predatory practice that needs addressed? So you would say that's the pharmaceutical world?
Yeah, that's one of them. I mean, and then I think the other one is probably social media and freedom of speech. Companies like Facebook and Snapchat, and there's various other reasons that I would go after them because they're number one way human smugglers and traffickers communicate. But they seem like a giant behemoth, and they control basically how we communicate now. And like even this program, somehow you're relying on big tech, and they have the power now to silence speech pretty much at a whim.
Yeah, well, and that's we hope our Roku channel treats us fairly. And so far, we are on the web and we are on all social networks, and we are at the mercy of what they allow. We try to make sure we do our best to follow the guidelines. But when you mention those entities, the question was on predatory practices. So is that something in your purview that you would follow as the AG, saying whatever it is? I'll use I'm using your analogy, but are you saying the restrictions is something that you'd be able to, in your purview, then address?
Yes, absolutely. So there have been cases lately where a business owner speaks out on political issues, and then nothing about their business, which didn't have anything political, is taken down. And with so much online shopping, it's not just protecting consumers, it's also protecting business owners from bigger businesses that are predatory. It's kind of like big fish to small fish. And it just, you know, with everything being so attached to either Google or Apple or this or that, that they literally can close a small business by taking all of their things down. And, you know, it does seem to happen more to conservatives than it does to liberals. And that is predatory. If someone can just shut your business down and there's nowhere else you can go because of the large monopoly that these big companies now have, I think that is a predatory practice.
So, Tiffany, staying on the predatory practices a little bit, we're going to talk about something that's really near and dear to my heart, really near and dear to our viewers' heart. Our company started out as a sports company doing streaming and working with the leagues. And so we have a very intimate relationship with leagues. I myself helped run leagues, build leagues in the Valley, sports leagues across the Valley. One thing that not only have we got emailed about to ask you all about, but I can talk about this personally, and I apologize for long-winded intro on this, but this hurts communities every day. Youth sports is something that is a service that services 300,000 kids in Maricopa County alone. And predatory practices in youth sports are run amok. Anywhere from jersey orders not ever making it to the purchaser, to tournaments and leagues where people set their league up and get registration, and then all of a sudden, oh, no league this year, and there's no returning of money. A lot of bait and switch tactics. I have helped try to lead the forefront on this with a lot of those that have dealt with these issues. We have went to the AG's office and put a lot of complaints out there. So the question with that background is, when we have, as viewers of this network, when we have a complaint where we're seeing predatory practices in youth sports, and it's happening in soccer, flag football, and softball especially, when these things happen, right now we can drop a complaint off or call in a complaint, and that's it. We have no tracking system. We have no idea if anybody's working on it. So what would be your plan to make it more user friendly, make it to where, when there's a complaint, you actually feel like you're being heard, and there's a follow-up. Maybe there's an email back, hey, we're looking into this, or this doesn't meet the threshold, whatever it may be. Because right now, folks that are complaining and saying, hey, I gave my kids $200 that I had saved for his sports to this organization, this private organization, and they took our money and canceled. And now, what do we do? They can't afford an attorney. So the Attorney General, being the Consumer Protection Agency to some degree, what process would you do differently? Because right now it's a black hole. We put the complaint in, and then we hope that someone's talking to somebody.
And that's really frustrating. Can you imagine if you hired a private attorney and you told them your problem, and then they never said anything to you again? You would be like, hey, I want my money back. So I think I've actually filed some other complaints with the AG's office through the years and not got a single response, nothing. It's like it just went into a black hole somewhere. And, and that's not acceptable. Every single complaint needs to be answered with, we don't have jurisdiction, they didn't break the law, or yes, they did. We're going to pursue it further. We may not tell you what we're doing, because sometimes investigations are investigations, but just to leave it. And it is an absolute predatory practice. And it's one that it's actually pretty near and dear to my heart. So I played softball, basketball, volleyball, junior PGA golf. I mean, I was a total jock in high school. And my daughter played, she's homeschooled, but played for the Casa Grande Union High School tennis team and was involved. And I think the ones at the schools are a lot more regulated. But these leagues, it's no different than any other consumer fraud area, except, you know, it's not just the money, it's the kids are looking forward to it. A lot of times, extracurricular activities are really hard for family budget, and people are giving up things so that their kids can play football or softball or basketball. And for fraud to be in those areas is really unconscionable. And I'm not sure, no, I am sure it's teaching our children that it's okay to engage in dishonest practices, and the attorney general won't do anything about it. I want them to have faith in our system, faith in our government. And so absolutely we would take those serious. I'm actually kind of shocked to know that there's no answers to those complaints.
Yeah, I just know that we spent a lot of time on this issue personally, and it's just, and now that we have this platform and forum, and we send out emails to our viewers to ask them, hey, send in questions, and this was a heavy question because a lot of our viewership is out of the sports world, and this is happening because in 8th grade and under, most public schools and some private schools don't have sports. So it's been left, a lot of the older states, we're a young state. A lot of the older states have sports all the way through from 3rd, 4th grade up. Maybe you played baseball in the summertime with a private company. But other than that, sports were not really privatized in other older states. In this state, because it is such a young, state, that's why we have it all private. I've talked to a lot of the folks on either side of the aisle. They have their reasons why it will never get funded. But the reality is it's been left to the open market, and I feel like as someone, and I guess I'll advocate on our viewers' behalf. I feel like the youth sports have been overlooked by the AG's office, and we would just love to find a way to where if there are questions, or are we one of 5,000 complaints, or are we one of 5? We really we have no idea. There's no tracking available for that. So,
well, and I think that's really important because the AG would see that there's been 10 complaints on this company where you may not know, or this is a problem in this industry, because they are getting the complaints. And the other thing is, my husband and I run a really large youth shooting sports team, and parents invest a lot of money in these, and we are super, super careful, including opening the books to the families, so they can see where the money went and how it is, and making sure everybody gets what they're supposed to. And we don't make money off it, we actually lose money off of it. It's just a labor of love. But um, it's just unfortunate anytime that people go to a government agency, and that agency, which isn't just the Attorney General's office, it's bureaucrats in general, don't think it's important, don't think they owe you a duty of at least answering, and saying, hey, we're looking at it, or even we're not, but just an answer. And I think that, youth sports, I hate that we don't have them in schools. I'm not running in a funding position, but sports teach children things that they'll never learn anywhere else. And I feel like some of my best qualities were developed because I played, sports from 3rd grade clear through high school. It's not just a frivolous thing. It's really important, and it brings our families together, our communities together. I will take it seriously. I would be the first attorney general who's a mom. And I think that sometimes you look at things differently. Like, what if this happened to my child? That all, year, or that the child saves up the money, mowing yards or doing whatever, and then that money is taken. And there's no pass on this. The law is the law. If you're committing, consumer fraud, you're committing consumer fraud, and we will go after you.
All right. So I won't labor that point anymore, but I've made a promise to our viewers that we will hit that question for everyone, and we want to make that awareness. So let's jump into some of the civil rights and civil liberties here in Arizona. We never know when the next flashpoint of civil unrest is going to happen. Whether it's contrived through false narratives or it's legitimate, the results are still the same. We have people vandalizing and using their own reasons to wreak havoc on other people's property. So when either party decides, because I have seen it on either side of the aisle, frankly, when either party decides that vandalism and violence is their way to make their voice heard, as the Attorney General, what would you do to leverage your office to protect citizens' properties, protect citizens themselves from having to deal with? We saw what happened in the Capitol just a few weeks ago. So just give me your take on that. What in your purview you would do? What would you do differently? What do you think you could do to help prevent these things? So just if you could riff on that a little bit and just let me know where you'd come from in that point of view.
So the Attorney General's office does not prosecute felonies. We don't have first jurisdiction there. It's your county attorneys. And, when people think that they can get away with destroying monuments, breaking out buildings in the Arizona Senate, terrorizing people, we saw some really scary things in Portland and Seattle a couple summers ago. That's not acceptable by anyone, right or left. I will always protect the freedom of assembly, the freedom of speech for peaceful protest. But when you start to hurt others or hurt property, then we will send a very strong message. So if a county attorney, what happened at the state capitol, not a single person was charged with anything. So there is no deterrent. Why not go do it again? It just seems like people just walk away. The Scottsdale Mall, I don't think anyone was charged with that one. And that's falling on the county attorney's office. Now, what the AG can do in that respect is that we have a lot of financial influence over county attorneys, as well as legal, in some ways, influence. And there's also something called a SB 1487 complaint that a legislator can file with the Attorney General. And that gives us power to go in and say, look, if the county is not going to prosecute these crimes, then if they don't, and they're legitimate, like you have good evidence and you should go to, you should prosecute it, then we can remove their shared revenue. So their funding that they get from the state of Arizona. But I also think the Attorney General isn't just a county attorney. It's probably the most powerful office in Arizona. And I think that the Attorney General, number one, needs to make it clear, come out and say, we are not going to allow this in our state. We have a zero tolerance for destruction. And then the second part of that is standing up for our police officers, because a lot of times when you see these things, you see peace officers standing there in riot gear and basically taking a lot toward themselves. And the second they push back or anything, they're tried in the media before all the facts are out. And as Attorney General, of course, we don't want any bad officers, but we are not going to try and convict people in the media. As Attorney General, I will come out and stand by our law enforcement officers who, by the way, are underfunded, undermanned, completely discouraged. And as the top cop and the one with the big bullhorn, I will protect our officers who are standing between us and people who would do us harm.
All right. So it's GOP primary. I think every candidate has had somewhere where they've picked up a gun and took a picture. So when we talk about gun issues, the Second Amendment, if you could share with our viewers your bona fides on your position on the Second Amendment. And then the second part of that question is, after every tragic shooting, and they're tragic, it's heart-wrenching when you hear these incidents happen and you think about your own kids being at school, and you just it's breathtaking. So every time it happens, we have people in power who talk about gun issues and red flag laws or whatever they may be. So talk to me about the Second Amendment and what you would do if the federal government put in some regulations that you would feel is federal overreach, what would be your how would you handle that situation?
Okay. Well, let me kind of tell you where I'm coming from on the Second Amendment. I'm not just a candidate who held a gun because I'm running for office. I've been teaching youth shotgun sports for 15 years. I own a youth sporting gun range. So we have pistol, rifle, archery, trap skeet, and five stand. And also, I live in the middle of three cartel smuggling routes. So firearms aren't just for fun, that we could not live here without owning guns. It's just, there's no one to protect us. I mean, we're just too far from police. It's 25 minutes, and by then it's going to be too late for our family. And I actually believe the Second Amendment is a litmus test for the rest of the Constitution. It's the fail safe amendment. And also, if you don't have a right to protect your family or yourself, do you really have any other rights at all? And every country that has taken away guns, Australia definitely became a lot more tyrannical. With if you watched what happened with COVID. My husband and children are Native American, and the first things the federal government did when they rounded up the tribes and put them on reservations is take all the guns. And so in America, it's an underpinning that we have a right to protect ourselves and to also protect ourselves against an invasion by a foreign power. The Japanese emperor or general in World War II said we could never invade America because there's a citizen with a firearm behind every rock and tree. And then also, I don't ever want to go there, but it also is a check on a tyrannical government. Now, I am not for red flag laws because I think that they not only violate the second, but the first, the fourth, the fifth, because you're literally you're losing a constitutional right without due process, without real due process, like being convicted of a felony, that sort of thing that we, do restrict firearms on. And I have a real problem with that because it could be, here's a red flag for you, and here's a red flag for you, and who decides these things. I fought the red flag laws DC put up in 2018 very vocally, even on television. And I think that it is a constitutional right. And Article 2, Section 26 of the Arizona Constitution says citizens have a right to own a firearm to protect themselves and the state. So it's an even broader Second Amendment than what's in the U.S. Constitution. So as Attorney General, there's two lanes I would be in to protect that. Obviously, I do feel that the bill that was just passed federally is unconstitutional. We would go to court to challenge that bill. The other part that I've seen through the years, because I am so heavily involved in the gun world, I'm A-rated by the NRA, I'm heavily into the gun world, is regulatory actions where you can't get ammo or you can't get parts. And it's kind of a sneaky way to infringe upon our Second Amendment rights. And so pushing back on that as well. Now, as to schools, I'd hate when issues are put together in a way that that maybe shouldn't be. Our Second Amendment rights for law-abiding citizens are one thing. The school shootings have been going on and on. I used to teach public school before I went to law school. There's no security at our schools. When I first started practicing law, there was a lot of courtroom shootings, and there wasn't very much security going into the courtroom. Now you are going through metal detectors, there's security guards with guns everywhere, and guess what? The courtroom shootings stopped. And so it astonishes me that we have more security for a casino, a bank, elected officials, government offices, but leave our schools wide open. And we have not had the will to spend the money to actually fix the problem. And I truly believe sometimes politicians want a problem to continue because it's a good way to get elected or raise money off of on both sides. And this is a pretty simple problem to solve. We just need to up the security at schools. I mean, children are our most precious resource. And if we can't spend money on that, which is a function of the government, I don't know. So The two things are separate. I would be advocating at the state legislature for security and what that looks like. It's our job to push policy as well as enforce the law. And it's just time that we do it. But a lot of these shootings, what stopped the shooter was a good guy with a gun. And if people are out to kill children, I want to be able to protect mine. So there I am. I think I answered all your questions. It was like
That's okay. That's okay. No, I great answers, great information. I just wanted to hear your position so the viewers could get your take, and I think they've learned a lot about you on that. So that's awesome. Let's jump to our next one. Next question here. We have AZ Cities have said, I believe it was Tucson and Phoenix, they have said that they will disregard the new abortion ruling. Is there any action that the AG's office can take against these cities if they decide that they're not going to follow the rules? And whether it be the abortion ruling or whether it be any other thing, when a city says they're not enforcing the law, what is your job? How do you handle it? And I guess this does tie into the politicization, because I've also watched other candidates say that they wouldn't do this because of their political views. So what would you be prepared to do, and in your scope, what can you do?
So we do have kind of a precedent. The city of Tucson passed some really unconstitutional gun laws. Attorney General Brnovich won a lawsuit against them to make them follow Arizona law. And there's really two things an attorney general, actually three, that an attorney general can do. The first is we can actually sue them. The second is, like I said, regarding the riots, is we can go after their state funding and have that removed, which is really, really painful. And then the third, I always think of it as soft power of letting people know this is going on, pushing through the legislature. But with the SB 1487 complaint sitting there, we have real teeth to say, no, you will enforce the law. And sometimes it's we're not going to enforce the law, and sometimes it's we're going to enact laws that are unconstitutional. It kind of goes both ways with government agencies. And that's the beauty of the Attorney General's office, is we are kind of this rogue office that protects the people and makes, and protects the law. And make sure people follow it. And so I'd be really aggressive on this, because the abortion cases, there's been a lot of misstatement. Now it's illegal for women to have abortions in the United States. That's simply not true. The judges just returned the question of abortion back to the states, where it should have been all along constitutionally. And each state can make its own decisions based on what their representation says. But in Arizona right now, abortions are illegal, and it is a crime not to have one as a mother, but to provide one, and those laws need to be enforced.
Okay, so that kind of dovetails into my next question, which the reality is I hear and we've heard from all candidates talk about how their job is to be the consumer protector or fighting for the consumer, which we love and appreciate. Can you explain the role that you have with dealing with, I know we talked about just now about enforcement of some of these rules, but dealing with the other agencies, because it seems that you're the lawyer for the government too. So help explain your position in that way.
So the Attorney General's office is the legal counsel for almost every single state agency, except for the governor. They have their own separation of powers there. And this is an area that I have spent a huge amount of my legal career in, is dealing in the regulatory world, both state and federal. And so first thing is Attorney General, I'm going to call every attorney into the office that's working with or for an agency and make sure that they realize they work for the Attorney General's office, not the department of whatever, but that you work for the Attorney General's office, and make that super clear. Then the second thing is every department head will be put on notice that I want a report in a way that the federal government or a federal agency is usurping state agency power. So we have the Department of Environmental Quality in Arizona, And you've also got the Environmental Protection Agency, which is EPA, which is federal. Well, I just believe solutions are better locally. And I think it's an area that we've seen unconstitutional encroachment into states' rights. So we'd be pushing the feds out. And then the second thing each department head will be told is if you are dealing with a law abiding Arizona citizen, we're going to ask you at the Attorney General's office, do you even have legal authority as an agency to do what you're doing? Because a lot of these agencies love gray areas and they come down on someone and you are caught up in this odd administrative law world that's pretty complicated. It doesn't feel as just as, the court system by any means, and making sure that that they stay in their lane. Now, if there is jurisdiction and the person is a bad actor, we will there will be consequences. But if there's jurisdiction and let's say it's a business owner who's trying to comply, we're going to give warnings saying, I don't know, your television studio has, you know, those plants are dangerous or something. I'm just making something up. Please comply with fixing it. Because what agencies forget is that they're not there to work against the people. They're there to work for the people. And it's not just government versus the citizens. We're all supposed to be public servants. And so I just think that area has been neglected. I've hit walls with it. And I think that's one of the reasons people don't feel like they have a voice is because you run afoul of one of these agencies or an agent, a person who works for it, who just keeps coming back and almost makes it a vendetta. That will stop.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to kind of wrap up one question into another, just because it seems like, as I've talked with everyone, that's kind of how it's worked. So fentanyl and crime. So our crime has steadily increased. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I want to say it was we'd went from 4.5 per thousand to 4.8 per thousand crime incidents. Regionally, in Arizona has a second highest violent crime rate after New Mexico. And then we have all these our network went I believe it was last September, did a very deep investigative report into fentanyl. And holy cow. I mean, it's ravaging our communities. We had to do a story, and we don't encourage drug use, but we had to do a story to almost like a PSA to tell kids, if you smell a popcorn smelling smell in your marijuana, it's laced in fentanyl. Don't use it.
Right.
And I thought legalizing marijuana was supposed to get the street stuff off the streets. The reality is it's still there. It's still a problem. Our crime rate is spiked. And I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna wrap a few into one. The crime, fentanyl, and now we have a homelessness crisis that has taken over some of our cities. We went down with a few of our reporters earlier this past year, or earlier in January, I believe, and we had to leave. We didn't have security. It was not good. It was not a good environment. Felt like we were walking into a third world country. So what would you do in your purview? I know that you're the top cop, but you can't do everything. But what would you do to help with this crime rate, the fentanyl situation going on? Tiffany Shedd administration day one. How do you handle this? What I see as a huge crisis.
Well, it is a huge crisis, and it's also very attached to our porous border. 40% of the fentanyl coming into the United States is coming across the Arizona-Mexico border. Stopping that at the border would be a huge help to keep it out. There's so much fentanyl in the United States that I can't remember the statistic. It could kill every one of us how many times. And it's so dangerous because they're bringing it over and it looks just like a prescription. They put it into a tablet. It's invasive and probably the most deadly and addictive drug we've ever dealt with, even through the years in our society. But, when we have a system where people break the law and there's no consequences, and everyone sees that they broke the law and there's no consequences, then other people, well, it's okay to break the law. And then we're in this downward spiral. And so we need to make sure that our police are properly funded. They are not funded. We didn't defund, but they're heavily underfunded. Our prison system is heavily underfunded. We're missing, I think they said 800 short officers just in the city of Phoenix. I mean, every police agency across the board. And so when you're looking at drug crimes, unless they're a violent crime, the officers are having to triage what they go and investigate and do, because we are shorthanded. But again, I think the biggest issue with the fentanyl is the border. I mean, it is pouring across. I mean, where I live, there's hundreds of backpacks that all match. And cartel gives them to people crossing, and oftentimes those backpacks are filled with fentanyl. That's how they're getting it into the country. And human smuggling, drug smuggling are crimes that the attorney general can prosecute without a county attorney. One of the other main ways drugs have been coming into the state of Arizona is through the Tohono O'odham Indian Reservation, because it borders, it's right here by my house. And believe me, there is a lot coming through. And the U.S. Supreme Court in Oklahoma v. Castro just ruled that states have concurrent jurisdiction. So that allows the Attorney General's office to go after human smugglers, drug smugglers, sex trafficking on Indian reservations now, where before we were kind of handcuffed on that. And just being really tough on people going after the cartel, because it is all cartel generated at this point. There's no, they pretty much have a monopoly on the fentanyl business. Now, the homeless thing is different. It's not just one issue. So in Pinal County and a lot of the rural counties, the homelessness issue is a lot of veterans who have had PTSD or some traumatic injury, and they've fallen out of the system. And there's about 1,000 homeless veterans just living in the desert in Pinal County, which is astonishing to me. And, as a society, and this is not necessarily what I can do as Attorney General, but getting them back into the system where they can get the help they need. And then within the rest of the homeless population, you have drug addiction, you have poverty, you have some people, they prey upon them, which just spirals it downward, because if you do something to a homeless person, you're really not going to have any consequences. And so it's fighting the general lawlessness that causes the erosion to our society. But I'm not running for governor, so different programs and whatnot. But I think really cracking down on drug enforcement, also human smuggling, sex trafficking, that also plays into it. So all of those things.
Okay. So it kind of goes right into our next topic, which is the border situation. And I've asked everyone the same question, so I'll ask you first, just so I can get a yes or no. Do we have a border crisis?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
saying yes because some say no. Saying yes, tell me what your job day one. You are the new AG of Arizona, and you say, okay, it's time to get to work. What's your solutions?
Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to color my background is we live between three major smuggling routes. We're 90 miles from the border. I live on a 1,200-acre farm. And what we're seeing coming through now is military-aged males in full camo gear. It's worse than I've ever seen it. We just don't have the law enforcement to stop it. The federal government has basically said, come on in. And, I know that if you are here illegally, they ask you where you want to go, and the federal government's literally buying you a ticket to go there, giving you a parole document, and saying check in with ICE in 6 years. That's not acceptable. And so the state of Arizona has been paying the cost of a porous border for decades. Crime, fentanyl, loss of rural hospitals because they don't pay their bills, and the hospitals went under, like the hospital in Douglas. We're spending billions of dollars to medicate, educate, and incarcerate people who shouldn't even be here. Now, solutions, I'm the only one in the race that has real solutions based on what the Attorney General's office can do. I've spent a lot of time because we literally have it. We've had smugglers in our yard, not the farm, in our yard 3 times in the last 2 weeks. So it feels pretty personal. Number one, Arizona passed a new human smuggling law. We did not have a law in the books. It was overturned in 2014 by a federal court. We have a different court system now because of the Trump appointments. And so going after the people that are actually smuggling illegal aliens. And right now, the way it works is they walk across the border to, anywhere from Pinal County to Sierra Vista, and on social media companies like Snapchat, Facebook, that is how they're luring actually a lot of our youth, like 15 to 21 or 18 in that area, to come down and pick up a load of illegals because they pay them $1,000 a person. And it wasn't illegal to do that before. And so that needs to stop. But those social media companies, they have been very aggressive about taking down speech about elections or the border or guns. So don't tell me you don't know that there's human smuggling, sex trafficking, cartel operations on your site. And so at this point, they're aiding and abetting in smuggling. We have drop houses, and the Arizona law allows us to go after the owners of the drop houses with criminal penalties. I would advocate for the state legislature to declare cartel organizations as terrorists under Arizona law so that we can use the statutes that are already on the books to really go after cartel. If a governor has the will to do anything to secure the border, it's the Attorney General's job to defend those actions in court. And I believe under Article 1, Section 10 and Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution, we have a right to defend ourselves against an invasion. And I'm not using the word invasion to be dramatic, but it is important legal distinction, because immigration, the federal government has first jurisdiction over, but that's who's allowed to come here legally. When you have an invasion of hundreds of thousands of people into, Texas, Arizona, and Mexico or New Mexico, that is an invasion. And we do have retained that power as a state. I want to establish a criminal illegal alien database at the Attorney General's office so that we know the true cost of what's going on. Right now, law enforcement all has different systems. And so this would help with enforcement, prosecution, and also, every 24 hours, I'm going to email the governor and the state legislature with the atrocities that are happening because of an insecure border. Texas did this with Operation Lone Star. They went from zero funding for border enforcement to $3 billion because legislators who may not live where they're seeing it every day, like I am, kind of think, well, it's not that bad. But it is bad for every one of our communities because, it's $5,000 to $8,000 that they have to pay to be smuggled across the border. And oftentimes the immigrants coming in don't have that money. They have to pay it back when they're here. They're sold into sex trafficking. If they work in a legitimate business and they don't pay cartel back, they kill their relatives in Mexico. So it's a form of indentured servitude that I just don't believe that we should have in America. And two classes of citizens are non-citizens, but it's just a breakdown. And you can't be a nation without secure borders and certain things that are a right and a privilege of being a citizen of that nation. And we have a completely open border, and we are paying the price. I have a 14-point border plan on my website. I know that's a lot, but there's a lot the Attorney General can do. And so day one, day two, every single day that I'm Attorney General, this will be a top priority. I've had 3 friends murdered by cartel. I've watched what they've done to our community, and I still live where it's coming through, and I don't have the luxury of only thinking about the border because I'm running for attorney general. I'm running for attorney general because we need a solution to protect Arizonans because of the federal government's mismanagement, neglect, and intentional opening of the border.
All right. Well, I appreciate that answer. Very thorough. And I'll make sure you give us a plug to your website one more time before we let you go so they can go check out your 14-point plan. I mean, reality is 14 points sound very thorough. So it sounds like you really put your homework into this one, and you're serious. It sounds like it is your top priority. The
It
last
is.
last serious big issue we're going to talk about, which everyone's talking about. When I grew up, we didn't really think about election integrity. We didn't. It was just something. Of course, it was safe. This is America. It's easy. It's hard to cheat, easy to vote. That was how I was raised. We saw in Afghanistan, or not Afghanistan, but Iraq, when they got to vote and put their finger in, it made, as an American, made us feel a sense of pride to see that they got to have their voice be heard too. And then over the last few years, starting in 2016, Russians stole the election from with Trump winning. That was the narrative and the noise that was put out there. We got this 2,000 Mules video that's out there, and that's full of a lot of speculative things that, one side of the aisle says it's completely debunked and there's nothing to it. The other side is wanting prosecutions. So for our viewers, who are a lot of them are very apolitical, they've got into politics and stuff as they're now learning how important it is after 2020 and how who's in charge does matter. So knowing this, how do we cut through all the noise when we hear about election integrity? Because now all of a sudden, something that I was raised thinking that we had pretty solid. They had the jokes about maybe Chicago or something, vote early, vote often, something like that. But it was always a little tongue in cheek. We never worried about election integrity. Now our top candidates are all talking about election integrity. So talk to us about what you would do as the AG and your thoughts on how you would handle this situation.
Well, we have a lot of good laws on the books in Arizona to protect the elections and promote election integrity. Unfortunately, most of them are not being enforced. So, first of all, enforce the law. They're laws, they're not suggestions. And I don't care if you're a county reporter or the Secretary of State, you're going to run a fair, free, and competent election. I was actually up on the Navajo Nation on the general election for 2020 at a polling place, and all day long, poll workers were telling Navajos, who, by the way, didn't get the right to vote till 1948 in the state, that if you're a registered Democrat, it's illegal to vote Republican. That is criminal level voter fraud and disenfranchisement, and we should not allow that to go on. I happen to fall right into the middle of the 2022 problem because I got my voter ID card in June and looked, and they had changed my town from Eloy to Casa Grande. And so I called, and they wouldn't change it. The recorder would not change it, called the number on the card, went back and forth, escalated. And I said, I think your elections are going to be really messed up because you've changed everyone's towns. And they said, it won't matter. And I said, well, we have a voter identification law that my driver's license needs to match my ID, and it doesn't match anymore. And it just fell on deaf ears. I went to a lot of extreme measures to try to get it changed. It's still not changed. And when I went in to vote, I could suddenly vote in the city of Casa Grande's races, even though I don't live in the city of Casa Grande. And there were over 60,000 incorrect ballots sent out in Pinal County. And I don't know that that was intentional election fraud, but it was for sure election incompetence. And the attitude I met from Pinal County's election officials was one of go away, don't bother us, we're not changing it. And the elections don't belong to the government, they belong to the people. And where I live, I'm probably one of the few Republicans that live in my little neighborhood, very rural. And, people that don't have a law degree or aren't running for attorney general, that are calling in and wanting things to be correct, are hitting a stone wall. election integrity isn't so Republicans win and Democrats don't. It's so that everyone has a right that is a American citizen to vote. And it really bothered me that people feel like they don't have a voice, they don't know what's going on. The system needs to be much more transparent as to what the county recorders are doing, how election results are being tabulated. I believe in a lot more observers. The Attorney General's office only has one election attorney right now, which, even if you didn't think there was any fraud, is not enough, because they're dealing with the 2020 investigations as well as the 22 election that's going on. It's just not enough manpower to even do the job at a basic level. Need to boost that election integrity unit up by a lot. And, we have a month-long voting block in Arizona. And what I would love to do is have pro bono attorneys, which means you're volunteering to do legal hours, trained that during that month-long election that we have a hotline, so that if you don't, if it could be negligence, it could be fraud, but if you see something, you can call and there's somewhere to call. I just saw somebody put 50 ballots into a ballot box. Okay, that's crime in Arizona, unless you have 50 family members, which I seriously doubt you do. Or just, we don't know, poll workers who just don't know. You don't want those ballots to be put into the counting if we don't know that they're valid. The other thing that would really help is we need more funding for rural county recorders. There's three parts to election integrity. There's the voter rolls and making sure that those are clean, that people don't have multiple registrations, that we don't have dead people voting, just all of the stuff that you are cleaning up with the database. And a lot of our smaller counties like Apache, Navajo, don't have the manpower to keep up with keeping those rolls clean. That's a problem. We just don't have the funding. Then there's other county recorders who just don't want to do it. And then there's the actual election day, which needs to be beefed up so people know that their elections are free and fair and competent. And, when I was a kid, you got to vote on one day. And so everybody was in line. And so there was a lot of eyes just kind of patrolling the election system. I think it made it a lot more honest, because you're like, why are you voting as Bob? You're not Bob. I know Bob. It kind of added citizen eyes to it. And then finally, under the U.S. Constitution, it is the state's legislatures that decide the time, manner, and place of elections. It is not the job of the federal government. And as Attorney General, if the federal government, even policies I agree with, like voter ID, tries to take over Arizona's election, they will be in court so fast their head will spin, because you cannot allow unconstitutional laws you agree with and then only go after the ones you disagree with. It's not their jurisdiction. It's not one of their enumerated powers. It's specifically prohibited in the U.S. Constitution. And so making sure that even if it's a mess in Arizona, it's our mess, and that the federal government, so bills like HR 1 are completely unconstitutional. But election integrity isn't going to be just the AG. We don't have enough manpower to be at every polling place. It has to be every one of us kind of standing up for election integrity. And I was really angry over this Pinal County thing, because it's going to affect races and turnout. People are just not going to vote because they think it's rigged or broken. And that's a shame in this big of an election year. And I was really, really angry about it. And, as Attorney General, I don't work for the Republican Party. I don't work for the governor. I don't work for the county recorder. I work for the people of Arizona. And even if you vote completely opposite of how I vote, you should have a right to vote and know that it was counted and the tallies are correct. Because if not, we turn into Iraq, where Saddam Hussein gets 99.9% of the vote. And I think a lot of it is making sure our government agencies are transparent. And make no mistake, as Attorney General, if you cheat in an election, we will prosecute you to the full extent of the law, because you are cheating every American citizen when you cheat in an election.
All right. So We've talked about a lot of serious issues today, a lot. And it's a serious job. I mean, this is the big deal. This is the Attorney General of Arizona. But just to learn a little bit about Miss Tiffany Shedd, why don't you tell us something that if we Googled you, we wouldn't find out? Maybe something that your family knows about you, something fun. You play an instrument, maybe like, who knows? Just let's learn something about you that we don't know. What's your hobby? Something fun.
Well, I like dogs. I think that's my crazy is I have too many dogs. I love dogs, and I have a dog that's a Yorkie that's 2 pounds, literally 2 pounds. He's just teeny, and he's locked up because he'd want to be part of the conversation. And then I also have a dog that's 200 pounds. It's the largest dog I've ever seen. And those are my two dogs. And the little one is really mean. The big one is really nice. But my crazy is I love dogs. They're just such great friends. And they protect our family living here. My kids have grown up with them, and I'm a huge, huge dog person.
Awesome, awesome. It's always fun to find something unique like that out about each candidate. So thank you. So before we wrap, this time today we covered a lot, and I really appreciate you taking time out of your campaign, which is, it's you got a lot going on. So taking time to talk to our viewers is super important, and I really appreciate it. So I want to give you the last word here. If you could just give the pitch, just look in the camera, tell our viewers why when they show up on August 2nd, or when they get their ballot in the mail, if they've already gotten it, why they should fill out your name and say that you're the best person for the job.
Okay. Well, I am the best person for the job because I have the largest area of experience. The Attorney General's office covers almost every area of the law that you can think of, and I have skin in the game. So when we're talking about the border, I live in the middle of 3 smuggling routes and have experienced it, and are currently we are experiencing it. And if somebody doesn't think there's a border problem, they're welcome to stay at my house without guns, security, or my dogs. So that is very personal for me. The Second Amendment, because we live here, it's very important we have a right to defend ourselves and our family. And as Attorney General, I also have skin in the game on that and will defend your right to protect yourself and your family. Parental rights, I didn't just suddenly start talking about it. We've homeschooled our children for 20 years. 2 of them have already graduated college. 1 is in high school. And, in those early days, school choice and pulling your kids out of school to homeschool was not looked at by the government as a friendly option. And so whether it's critical race theory, whether it's school choice, whether it's medical decisions, because of my background in education, being on a school board, being a homeschool mom, I will engage in that area very heavily. As Attorney General, the statutes allow quite a bit of engagement as the Attorney General, and empowering parents to do what's best for their kids. And that is what Arizona law says, that we have an inherent right to direct the upbringing of our children. And just because you send them to a school or wherever, they are still your children. Our children belong to families, not to the government. And I would even sit in a school board meeting if there's misbehavior as the Attorney General. I'm not afraid to go to a meeting and observe. Election integrity, unfortunately, I have skin in the game there. I've watched 2 cycles now where one was fraud and one was just a big catastrophe that could change the outcome of every statewide race and race in Pinal County and city race. It was huge, and it was very frustrating because they wouldn't listen to a citizen. And hopefully, as Attorney General, they will listen to the Attorney General, because I'm going to be all over these county recorders to make sure that things are done right. Water is a huge issue right now in Arizona. We might lose 1/3 of our water supply. The Federal Department of Interior has come down with some pretty draconian demands. I think that the state of Arizona needs to be filing suit and pushing back on that. We used to have people that understood water and energy in state and federal government in Arizona. We have none. I'm the only person running for a state or federal office with a natural resource background. And so fighting for Arizona's water, fighting against the Forest Service for mismanagement of our forests so that we've had catastrophic fire damage, making sure we have all of the above energy options. And one of the things I'm proud of is, as an Arizonan, is our system is based on innovation, not regulation. And we actually reduced greenhouse gas in Arizona more than California, Oregon, and Washington combined. And we have less regulation, more incentive, and they have more regulation, less incentive. So I believe in the free market and just kind of guarding our resources and being good stewards of it so that, you know, it's abundant, and it's also, we're planning for 60 years. I will be a leader in those. And then finally, constitutional rights. I mean, we should not have to just give up a right. Here's a right, or you're not going to get your federal money, which is our money. There's no such thing as federal money. There's our money. And the federal government has a habit this day and age of saying, we'll give you a grant, or we'll give you your school's money if you give up constitutional rights. We will have them so fast in court for that coercion that your head will spin. So just protecting the autonomy of Arizonans, following the U.S. Constitution and the Arizona Constitution. And if there's people that haven't read the first couple bits of the Arizona Constitution, it mirrors the Declaration of Independence. It is a beautiful document. I would suggest you read it. And just stopping the overreach and protecting people from criminals and the government. You know, we're a fourth generation farm, and it feels like oftentimes every day somebody's trying to take something that you've worked really hard for. And just kind of making sure there's an even playing field and government stays in its lane and people have the freedom to raise their children, start businesses, live their lives as they see fit, as long as they're not hurting others, and have a just system that doesn't favor some and disfavor others. And I'm the only one that doesn't live in Maricopa County. And I think that it adds a perspective about natural resources, the tribes, the border, that has given me experience to truly understand it. I didn't start fighting for those issues because I ran for Attorney General. I've been fighting for these issues for decades, and just finally thought we need more firepower. And so I'm running for Attorney General.
Gotcha. Well, hey, I appreciate your time. It's been really great getting to know you, getting to hear your positions on the policies. As a programming note, we will be streaming live the election coverage on August 2nd. If you haven't got your ballot in the mail, check it out, find out where it's at. If not, turn out and go vote on August 2nd. And Miss Tiffany, thank you so much for being on the show. And that's a wrap for today. And just a reminder for all our viewers, go vote.
And HYFNtv.com.
Oh, thank you. I wanted to make sure you could plug that one more time. So say it one more time.
HYFNtv.com. SHEDDFORAZ.com.
And that's where they'll find everything you need to know about Miss Tiffany Shedd, who's running for the Arizona Attorney General spot for the Republican race here in Arizona on August 2nd. Thank you for joining us, and look forward to our next series of Secretary of States and governors. Thank you, guys.